Welcome, everyone, to The Deep Dive. Today we're embarking on, well, a truly profound journey, one that touches pretty much every human heart. What is love? I mean, is it just a feeling, a choice, some kind of grand, beautiful mystery we can never fully grasp? Or, with all the incredible advances in science lately, can we finally peel back the layers, understand it right down to its very core, maybe even measure it?
It's such a fundamental question, isn't it? Poets, philosophers, they've wrestled with it for millennia. And now, well, scientists are really stepping into the ring too. For this deep dive, we've pulled together a really fascinating stack of sources, everything from cutting-edge neurobiology, brain imaging studies, all the way through to philosophy, anthropology, even these new emerging debates around AI and, well, what that means for human connection. So our core quest today really is to explore this. Can love be fully explained as, a physical, measurable state in the brain? Or does it have dimensions that, well, maybe just go beyond pure biology?
That's right. So our mission, for you listening, is to take you on this journey through the science. What's the evidence saying about love as a physiological state? We'll unpack how scientists actually try to measure it. The chemicals, the brain pathways, all that intricate stuff happening inside our heads. But then, I'm going to step back a bit, broaden the scope. Consider those other perspectives, the ones that suggest love might be, well, more than just neurons firing. Get ready for some, I think, genuine aha moments. We're going to dive into what love literally does to your brain and body, and then explore those tantalizing questions that, well, maybe science hasn't quite answered yet.
Indeed. It's a journey that really demands. We balance that scientific rigor with the profound, very subjective experience of love itself. We have to acknowledge right from the start it's incredibly complex. Love is this intricate emotion, right? It clearly has biological underpinnings. You can see them. But it also has these elusive subjective qualities. That's what makes it so captivating and, frankly, so challenging to study properly.
Okay, so let's start with the basics, because when we say love, it feels like such a huge, almost undefinable word. We use it for everything, right? From pizza to our deepest relationships. How do scientists even begin to wrap their heads around something so multifaceted?
That's a really excellent point. And in science, you quickly realize love isn't just one single thing. It's not monolithic. Instead, researchers tend to talk about distinct, though often, intertwined forms. Think of it like a spectrum. You've got romantic love, right? That intense passion, desire, attraction for a partner. That's usually what first comes to mind.
Right.
Then there's maternal or parental love, that really fierce, protective, caregiving bond. Think of parent and child.
Sure.
We also talk about attachment love. That's more the long-term affectionate connection.
Yeah.
Built on comfort, trust, deep familiarity. You see it in close friendships or stable long-term partnerships.
Okay, makes sense.
And then, of course, there are these ideas of spiritual love. You find this in religious or philosophical traditions, often described as unconditional, maybe transcendent, selfless compassion. It extends beyond just individuals.
That's a really helpful breakdown, because it shows how even though these different types feel distinct, maybe look different on the outside, they might actually share some common biological machinery underneath it all.
Exactly.
But at the same time, they clearly have unique features, different subjective feelings that probably go beyond what you can just measure in a lab, right?
Yeah.
That core feeling, that essence of love, it seems like something we all recognize, even if it looks different.
And that right there, that's the crux of the debate we're diving into today. The big question is, can all these kinds of love, from the fiery, passionate kind to the calm, spiritual kind, can they all be fully explained by biology? By specific brain states, chemical processes we can map out? Or do they involve something more, dimensions that just go beyond the purely biological?
So we're kind of talking about a philosophical fault line here, aren't we? On one side, you've got these reductionist views, people who basically argue that love is nothing but neurons firing and hormones surging. It's purely physical, and if you understand the bits and pieces, you understand the whole thing.
Exactly, that's the idea. If you can account for all the neurology, all the biochemistry, then you've essentially explained love, full stop. Then on the other side, you have these more holistic or emergent views. These perspectives argue that, well, yes, love involves biology, but it also involves qualities of mind or relationship, maybe even spirit, that you can't entirely reduce down to just the biological parts. It's that classic idea, isn't it? The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Something new, something maybe irreducible emerges when those biological bits combine.
Okay, so why has science, a field that usually focuses on the observable, the measurable, why has it gotten so interested in trying to pin down something that used to be seen as, almost mystical, purely poetry or philosophy? What changed?
Well, from a purely biological angle, there's a really powerful argument that love, at its very core, is an evolutionary adaptation. It's seen as this fundamental mechanism that over millions of years drew individuals together. For mating, sure, but also for reproduction and, crucially, for mutual support. All of that dramatically boosted the survival chances of our species.
Right, survival.
Think about John Bowlby's work on attachment theory. It was groundbreaking. He proposed that human infants are biologically wired to form loving bonds with their caregivers. This isn't just, a nice fuzzy feeling. It's a basic survival strategy. It ensures protection, food, learning for these incredibly vulnerable babies.
Okay.
And similarly, romantic pair bonding, where two people commit to each other, that's thought to have evolved specifically to enhance cooperation, especially in raising offspring, which again drastically increases the chances that their genes and our whole human lineage survive and thrive.
That's a really powerful point. So this evolutionary angle, it implies that if love is that critical for our existence, it absolutely should have physical markers in the body and brain, tangible systems that make it happen.
Precisely.
And that's a premise, as we're about to see, that's backed up by a whole mountain of recent scientific studies, isn't it?
Yes, and this is where we really get into the nitty-gritty of the neurobiology.
Mm-hmm.
Researchers often talk about love involving an ancient cocktail of brain chemicals. Neuropeptides, neurotransmitters. Essentially, it's a mix of several key chemicals acting in very specific brain circuits, all working together to create the feelings and behaviors we call love. They've pinpointed the major players: dopamine, oxytocin, vasopressin, serotonin, and endorphins, just to name the big ones.
The love cocktail.
Chuckles, you could call it that. And these chemicals act in specific brain areas, like the ventral tegmental area, VTA, and the nucleus accumbens. These are key parts of your brain's reward system.
Yeah.
Ancient pathways. They light up for things like food, water, even addictive drugs, and, yes, for love. Then there's the caudate nucleus, involved in anticipating rewards. The amygdala, usually our fear center, which interestingly tends to quiet down when we're in love.
Really? It gets quieter.
Yeah, quite significantly in some studies.
Yeah.
And then areas like the insula and prefrontal cortex, which are involved in deep feelings, empathy, and complex judgment. Each part plays a role in that euphoria, the motivation, maybe even that blindness we associate with being head over heels.
Okay, that's a lot of brain activity. So let's break down these chemicals. What exactly are they doing to us when we're falling in love? Let's start with dopamine. We hear about it a lot with pleasure, but what's its specific job in romance?
Dopamine is absolutely central. It's key to the brain's reward system, no doubt. And in love, it's critical for driving the excitement and, crucially, the craving. There are these landmark fMRI studies, functional MRI, where they measure blood flow to see brain activity in real time. Researchers like Arthur Aron and Helen Fisher, back around 2005, they showed that when people looked at photos of their beloved partner, these dopamine-rich areas, like the VTA and the caudate nucleus, they just lit up intensely.
Wow.
These are areas linked to pleasure, but also focused attention and that powerful motivation to go after rewards.
So it's not just feeling good, it's wanting, seeking.
Exactly. It's the wanting. It literally focuses your attention and your goal-directed behavior intensely onto that person. It encourages you to seek that individual, much like you'd seek out something highly rewarding, like a drug in some ways. Helen Fisher and her team even famously described romantic love as a natural addiction.
A natural addiction. That's a strong phrase.
It is, but it's because it activates that same VTA nucleus accumbens pathway that's involved in things like cocaine use. It's not just a metaphor. It's a shared biochemical reality. And it helps explain that intense drives, sometimes the obsessive nature of early romance.
Right.
And we see this backed up really dramatically in animal studies, especially with prairie voles.
Ah, yes, the monogamous rodents.
Chuckles. That's them. They're one of the few rodent species that form long-term pair bonds. And researchers found that if you block or enhance dopamine in a specific part of their reward system, the nucleus accumbens, you can actually change their partner preference.
No way.
Yeah, in one really fascinating experiment, a female vole usually bonds with the male she first mates with. But if the researchers stimulated her dopamine receptors right when she met a different male, she actually formed a preference for that new male instead, even without mating.
That's incredible. So dopamine is like a key trigger for choosing who we fall for.
It seems to be a critical part of that mate choice mechanism, yes. It helps create that intense, focused attraction to one particular person over others.
This does raise a big question, though. If love triggers the same brain circuits as addiction, How should that shape how we think about romantic pursuit, that feeling of obsession? Does it mean early love is almost like inherently a bit compulsive?
It certainly gives us a powerful lens to understand that initial, sometimes almost irrational phase, doesn't it? And while dopamine gets us hooked, gets that initial pursuit going, other hormones then step in to build the more stable long-term bond, and that's where oxytocin and vasopressin come in.
The cuddle chemicals.
Exactly. Often called the love hormone or cuddle chemical. They really are the architects of attachment. They underlie that long-term bonding that helps relationships last. Oxytocin especially gets released during intimate moments, hugging, orgasm, but also childbirth and nursing. And it actively promotes feelings of trust and connection.
And these are big in those vole studies too, right? Like the key to their monogamy.
Absolutely crucial for the voles.
Hmm.
Their role in animal pair bonding is really striking. Monogamous prairie voles have way higher densities of oxytocin and vasopressin receptors in key brain areas compared to their more promiscuous cousins, the montane voles. And you can manipulate it. Give voles oxytocin, and you can sometimes induce a pair bond even if they haven't mated. Block oxytocin or vasopressin, and it disrupts bond formation. Now, it's complex. A more recent study, I think 2023, found that voles genetically engineered to lack oxytocin could still form bonds.
Oh.
Yeah, suggesting maybe there are other pathways, some redundancy in the system, but still, these hormones are undeniably major players.
Okay, so it's not the only thing, but it's clearly important. What about in humans?
In humans, oxytocin surges during sex, during affectionate touch. It's been shown to increase feelings of trust, emotional intimacy. For example, giving people intranasal oxytocin, basically a sniff of the hormone up the nose.
Right.
Made men who are already in monogamous relationships keep a greater physical distance from an attractive female stranger they just met, almost like it promotes fidelity.
Wow, like a biological loyalty booster.
Falcons. Well, maybe loyalty booster is a bit strong, but it does seem to promote fidelity and trust in established relationships. It also increased people's willingness to trust strangers in those economic trust game experiments. They'd send more money to someone else.
That's amazing. So it's not just feeling good, it's actively changing our social behavior, our decisions.
It seems so. And higher natural levels of oxytocin circulating in couples have been correlated with better relationship quality. One study found people with higher oxytocin levels tended to see their partners more positively, sort of through rose-colored glasses. They overlooked minor flaws, expressed more gratitude.
So it buffers against the small annoyances.
It seems to act as a buffer against relationship stress, yeah. And vasopressin, its close relative, that seems linked more to protective behaviors in relationships, long-term partnership stuff. And in men, it's thought to support monogamous tendencies, maybe even mate-guarding behaviors.
Mate guarding, like jealousy.
Potentially linked to that protective aspect, yes. And interestingly, there are genetic links. Variations in the gene for the vasopressin receptor, ADPR1A, have been associated with differences in attachment style and even marital stability in men.
Wow, so our genes might predispose us slightly towards certain bonding styles?
It's a contributing factor, it seems.
Okay, so let me try and summarize this bit. Dopamine gets us hooked, that initial intense chase.
Right.
But then oxytocin and vasopressin come in to kind of keep us together. They help that wild passion settle into a calmer, more contented companionship.
That's a great way to think about it. It's like the brain has this beautifully designed system for both the spark and the long, steady burn.
Okay. What else is in this cocktail?
Well, and we have serotonin, and its role is,
Yeah.
well, it's quite surprising. Serotonin is a neurotransmitter usually involved in regulating mood, sleep, appetite. But intriguingly, its levels seem to drop significantly during the early, intense stages of romantic love.
They drop. I thought serotonin was the feel-good chemical.
It often is associated with well-being, yes. But a pioneering study by Donatella Marazziti and her team back in 1999 found something fascinating. They measured serotonin transporter levels in the blood of people who had recently fallen head over heels in love. And their levels were significantly reduced, strikingly similar, in fact, to the levels seen in patients with obsessive-compulsive disorder, OCD.
Wait, seriously? So when you're madly in love, your brain chemistry actually mimics a mild form of OCD?
That's what the evidence suggested.
That is wild. It kind of explains that feeling of being completely consumed, doesn't it?
Precisely. It's like your brain temporarily takes the calming break off. This biochemical state aligns perfectly with the subjective experience. Early love often involves those intrusive, preoccupying thoughts about the person, emotional ups and downs, and almost obsessive focus.
Right, you can't stop thinking about them.
Exactly. One hypothesis is that the high dopamine, that reward drive, and maybe high stress hormones, actually suppress serotonin activity.
Mm.
Result, your thoughts get kind of stuck on the loved one, almost irrationally. Morozidi herself famously quipped, "Being in love is a form of madness."
Chuckles. Okay, I feel slightly better about some past experiences now.
The good news, though, is that this state is temporary. As relationships mature, usually after about, say, 1 to 2 years, serotonin levels tend to return to normal. And that coincides with the shift from that intense infatuation to more stable companionate attachment.
Phew. So you don't stay in that madness forever. It's almost reassuring to know there's a biological clock ticking on that intense, all-consuming phase.
Exactly. And that actually leads us neatly to his other surprising player, stress hormones, specifically cortisol. You know the phrase madly in love? It turns out there's a real biological basis for the madly part. New love is actually physiologically stressful.
Stressful, but it feels so good, usually.
I know. It's a paradox, isn't it? But studies have found that cortisol, the body's main stress hormone, is significantly elevated during that initial passionate phase. For instance, a 2004 study, also involving Morozidi, found that people who'd fallen in love within the past 6 months had much higher cortisol levels than singles or people in long-term relationships.
Okay, this is really interesting. Love feels wonderful, but our bodies are reacting like we're in a mild crisis. What does that tell us about early romance?
Well, it likely reflects all the anxiety, the excitement, the sheer uncertainty of forming a new bond. You know, all those questions. Do they love me back? Where is this going? That triggers a physiological response similar to mild stress or hyperarousal.
Ah, so that's the racing heart, the sweaty palm.
The butterflies in the stomach, exactly. That's your sympathetic nervous system kicking in, fueled partly by cortisol.
Okay.
And interestingly, these cortisol changes often go along with shifts in sex hormones too. In that same study, men in early love actually had lower testosterone compared to single men. Yeah, while women in early love had elevated testosterone compared to single women.
Huh. Why would that be?
One idea is that the dip in men's testosterone might sort of promote gentler, more cooperative behavior needed for pair bonding, less aggression, maybe, while the rise in women's testosterone might boost libido, maybe assertiveness, essentially narrowing the behavioral gap between the sexes as they form that initial partnership.
Fascinating. Nature's way of getting them on the same page.
Perhaps. And again, like the serotonin changes, these hormonal shifts are temporary. Within about 12 to 24 months, cortisol levels usually normalize. And love transitions from being a stressor to actually becoming a stress buffer. A stable, loving relationship, long-term, can really help reduce baseline stress and anxiety.
Wow. It's incredible that the same bodily responses we might have to, I don't know, giving a presentation are also part of that exhilarating rush of falling in love.
It really shows how profoundly love impacts our entire system. And it's not just those big 5 chemicals we've talked about. There's a whole supporting cast, like norepinephrine, another stress-related chemical. That also rises in early love, contributing to sleeplessness, maybe loss of appetite, that feeling of being totally wired.
Right. Can't eat, can't sleep.
Exactly. Then you have endorphins. These are the brain's natural opioids. They're thought to play a bigger role in the later stages, in companionate love. They produce feelings of comfort, security, even pain relief. The idea is, as that dopamine-driven passion starts to mellow, endorphins might take over more, maintaining a calmer, more soothing kind of pleasure and bond, often released through things like laughter, shared activities, physical touch.
Well, it's not just 1 or 2 chemicals, but a whole evolving symphony playing out over time.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And there are others too. Things like nerve growth factor, or NGF. That's been found to spike in the blood of new lovers, which might reflect the brain's plasticity, how it's literally rewiring itself as routines and priorities shift because of this new relationship. Elevated NGF might also contribute to those intense emotional highs.
Okay.
And you hear about others too, adrenaline, PEA, phenylethylamine, prolactin. They're all likely playing roles at different points. The main takeaway is, love isn't down to a single love chemical. It kind of hijacks multiple neurochemical systems all at once. You've got reward, stress, obsessive thoughts, bonding, all firing together. It's this emergent state that arises from this complex cocktail orchestrated across different parts of the brain.
This really sounds like a whole brain experience. So if it's this big orchestration, where does love actually live in the brain structurally? What do the brain imaging studies show us?
Well, brain imaging, especially fMRI, has been revolutionary here. It's allowed us to actually map love onto specific neural structures. And when people who say they're deeply in love look at pictures of their partner or even just think loving thoughts about them, a remarkably consistent pattern shows up across different people. Romantic love reliably activates parts of that reward circuit we mentioned, especially the VTA and the nucleus accumbens caudate, pleasure and motivation centers.
Right.
It also lights up areas involved in social cognition and emotion,
Yeah.
like the insula and the anterior cingulate cortex.
Yeah.
These are involved in processing intense feelings, empathy.
But what's really fascinating, you mentioned earlier, is what gets turned down. You said the fear center, the amygdala.
Exactly. That's one of the most striking findings. Circuits involved in negative emotions and critical social judgment tend to get deactivated. The amygdala, which usually flags threats or negative social cues, shows reduced activity when people gaze at their beloved's photo.
So love's blind isn't just a saying, it's actually happening in the brain.
It seems to have a biological basis, yes. When we're deeply in love, our brain literally dampens the pathways that might register criticism or suspicion about our partner. Parts of the prefrontal cortex, involved in higher-level judgment and critical thinking, also show decreased activation.
So our skepticism is kind of offline.
Partially offline, yes, which fosters that idealization of the partner that's so typical of early love. Meanwhile, those deep reward circuits in areas involved in social bonding, like the hypothalamus, are highly active, creating that powerful sense of well-being and connection. What's fascinating is comparing different types of love.
Like romantic versus maternal love.
Exactly. Studies comparing mothers looking at their babies versus people looking at their romantic partners show really interesting overlaps and differences. Both types of love strongly activate that dopamine-rich midbrain area, the VTA.
Okay, so the reward part is shared.
Yes, it underscores this shared evolutionary mechanism for rewarding attachment. We're wired to bond intensely with those crucial for our survival and well-being, whether it's a child or a mate. But there are differences. Maternal love tends to show relatively more activation in brain regions linked to cognitive and emotional regulation parts of the prefrontal cortex, the orbitofrontal cortex.
Why would that be?
Well, it might reflect the caregiving aspect, the need for empathy, planning, controlling one's own impulses for the sake of the child. Romantic love, on the other hand, often shows stronger activation in desire and arousal networks in the brain, which fits with the passionate, often sexual component.
So same core reward foundation, but tailored for different purposes.
Precisely. It highlights love's fundamental role in human evolution, whether it's ensuring the survival of offspring or the cooperation of partners.
Okay, so it's one thing to say love is physical, it lives in the brain, but can we actually measure it? How do scientists go about quantifying something so personal, so complex?
We absolutely can try, and scientists use a whole toolkit of methods to detect love's biological fingerprints. One really powerful way is looking directly at the brain using those brain imaging techniques we talked about, fMRI, PET scans, SPECT scans. These let us observe brain activity associated with love more or less directly. The classic experiment is the partner photo paradigm.
Right, you put someone in love in a scanner and show them pictures.
Exactly. Pictures of their beloved versus, say, a neutral acquaintance or just a familiar face.
Okay, let's unpack this. What does it mean that we can literally see love in a brain scan? Is it like flicking a switch, or is it more subtle?
It's definitely more nuanced than a switch, but it's undeniably observable. The difference in brain activation when someone sees their beloved compared to a neutral face reveals what we call a neural signature of romantic love. As we mentioned, those early fMRI studies by Aaron, Fisher, and others found really robust, consistent activation in dopamine-rich areas like the VTA and caudate nucleus when participants viewed their partner. This is objective evidence. Love isn't just metaphorical, not just in your heart. You can see its correlates and patterns of brain activity.
And this applies to other types of love, too, like maternal love.
Yes, those studies have been done too. Mothers viewing photos of their own child show overlapping activation in reward regions and areas rich in oxytocin receptors, like the hypothalamus. And it's specific to their child compared to other children.
So it's not just about what lights up, but maybe what doesn't light up, too.
Exactly. We talked about the deactivation. Both romantic and maternal love tend to deactivate the amygdala, the fear center, and the temporal parietal junction involved in negative social judgment. This suggests that attachment love, broadly speaking, involves dialing down social criticism and fear when it comes to the loved one. That biological basis for love is blind.
Right.
Now, there are limitations, of course. fMRI shows correlation, not necessarily causation. A lab isn't real life. There's individual variation. But that VTA activation in response to a beloved partner is remarkably consistent across diverse people, to the point where sophisticated computer analysis of fMRI data, multivariate analysis, can actually distinguish with pretty decent accuracy between someone who is in love and someone who isn't, just based on these brain patterns.
Wow. Getting clicked to a love detector?
Chuckles. Some people playfully call it that. It's certainly moving in that direction, technically speaking.
That's genuinely mind-bending. What about measuring the speed of love? Like, how fast does our brain react when we see someone we love?
For speed, we turn to electroencephalography, or EEG. That measures electrical activity right from the scalp. It gives you millisecond-level timing. So studies using event-related potentials, or ERPs. These are tiny electrical signals in the brain directly linked to a thought or perception.
Okay.
They consistently find that seeing a picture, or even just the name of your loved one, triggers a larger P300 waveform. That happens about 300 to 600 milliseconds after you see it, and it basically means your brain is going, whoa, pay attention, this is important, meaningful.
Wow, that fast.
And even earlier, around 250 milliseconds, there's something called the early posterior negativity, or EPN. It shows that the image of a loved one grabs your visual attention almost instantly, maybe even before you're consciously aware of it. And these markers seem pretty robust. They've been replicated across cultures, different types of stimuli. It shows a universal quick recognition.
Imagine a future where, I don't know, a little wearable EEG could tell you how in sync you are with your partner in real time.
Huh?
That's wild.
It is an exciting idea, and it's actually being explored with something called dyadic EEG hyperscanning.
Hyperscanning.
Yeah, where you put EEG caps on both partners at the same time and measure their brainwaves while they interact. Some studies are finding that when couples are physically close, maybe holding hands, their brain rhythms, particularly certain frequencies like alpha waves associated with calm alertness, can actually synchronize.
Their brainwaves sync up.
To some extent, yes.
Yeah.
And this physiological synchrony often correlates really well with how connected and empathetic the couples say they feel at that moment. It's almost like their nervous systems are having a quiet conversation, tuning into each other.
Wow.
EEG doesn't pinpoint where in the brain things are happening, as well as fMRI, but it's great for the when, and it's much less invasive and cheaper. It helps study love as it unfolds more naturally.
So it's not just the brain, though. Love affects our whole body, right? What other physical signs are scientists looking at?
Oh, definitely. Love triggers widespread changes in our autonomic nervous system and hormones. In new love, you often see that classic increased heart rate, maybe sweaty palms. That's the galvanic skin response.
Yeah.
It's due to sympathetic nervous system arousal, the fight-or-flight system getting excited.
Right, the jitters.
Exactly. But interestingly, in established long-term couples, being close and affectionate can have the opposite effect. It can be calming. Studies show their heart rates can synchronize and stress indicators go down when they just sit quietly together. Heart rate variability, or HRV, is another interesting one. That measures the variation in time between heartbeats. Higher variability is generally a sign of good cardiovascular health and flexibility. And higher HRV is associated with having a secure attachment style. Even just imagining an attachment figure can increase someone's HRV, suggesting that activating the mental idea of love can immediately tap into the body's calming parasympathetic response, the rest and digest system.
So love is this powerful physiological regulator. It can ramp us up, but it can also calm us down. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it really highlights how love isn't just an emotion. It's deeply involved in managing our body's basic systems.
Absolutely. And then, of course, there are the hormone assays, measuring hormone levels directly. We can measure oxytocin, cortisol, testosterone, NGF, prolactin, and others in blood, saliva, even urine. For instance, studies have had couples engage in affectionate interactions in the lab, talking warmly, touching, and then measured their saliva. They found significant rises in oxytocin compared to control groups. And the couples with bigger oxytocin boosts also reported feeling more trust, more bonded. Some studies even link it to boosts in immune function.
Wow, tangible health benefits potentially.
Potentially, yes. Now, all these physiological measures need careful interpretation. Hormone levels fluctuate for many reasons. A racing heart could be excitement, or it could be anxiety. They give us an objective window, but you always need the psychological context too. They don't tell you the subjective feeling of love.
Right. Beyond what's happening inside, love obviously shows up in how we act towards each other. How do scientists measure love in action?
They use some really clever behavioral paradigms. One famous example is the trust game from behavioral economics. Basically, person A gets some money and can choose to send some to person B. The amount sent triples. Then person B can choose to send some back. How much person A sends initially is seen as a measure of trust.
Okay.
And studies found that if participants got that intranasal oxytocin beforehand, they sent significantly more money. It shows how the biochemistry can directly influence trusting behavior.
That's direct evidence.
Yeah. Other approaches look at attachment security through behavior. People with secure attachment tend to regulate their emotions better, communicate more constructively during disagreements, things that trained observers can reliably code and measure. And then there are long-term studies, like those using the Gottman model. They track couples over years, even decades.
Gottman, he's famous for predicting divorce, right?
That's him. His work meticulously tracks the ratio of positive to negative interactions. Things like showing affection, expressing fondness, responding positively to a partner's bids for attention. These observable behaviors strongly predict relationship stability and well-being years down the line.
So what this all means is we're not just looking at chemicals in a test tube, but how those internal states actually translate into the actions, the habits that make or break our relationships.
Precisely. We also use self-report questionnaires, of course. Things like the Passionate Love Scale or Sternberg's Triangular Love Scale, measuring intimacy, passion, commitment. And often, scores on these subjective scales correlate with the biological measures. Someone scoring high on passion might show stronger brain reactivity to their partner's picture.
Makes sense.
Another interesting behavioral finding is nonverbal synchrony. Loving couples often unconsciously mirror each other's gestures, adopt similar postures, even synchronize their walking pace more than strangers or non-couples. It reflects this sort of implicit attunement.
Like they're literally in step.
That chuckles. In a way, yes. And empathy studies show this too. Couples often show high empathy for each other's pain. And as we mentioned, holding a loved one's hand can literally reduce perceived pain. And you can even see physiological linkage between the partner's nervous system responses during that.
Okay, so we have all these incredible tools, brain scans, EEGs, hormone tests, behavioral coding to quantify love. But what are the pros and cons here? Are we really capturing the whole essence of love by measuring these things?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Right.
Strengths are undeniable. Quantification has really shifted the study of love from just philosophy into empirical science. It brings objectivity. It helps uncover mechanisms like understanding oxytocin's role, opens up potential therapeutic avenues. We can now say, yes, love has measurable effects in brain reward areas, in oxytocin spikes, in a faster pulse. It's tangible. But the limitations are significant too. Love is just so multifaceted, so deeply subjective. The exact same physiological readings say high oxytocin could mean something very different experientially for a new mother versus a passionate new lover.
Right, the context is everything.
Context is huge. And lab love isn't real-life love. There's the Hawthorne effect. People act differently when they know they're being watched.
This really raises that important question. Can we measure the fingerprints of love without fooling ourselves into thinking we've captured the entire hand? It seems like we need some humility with this scientific reductionism.
You're spot on.
Yeah.
That humility is key. There's also the inherent problem of reductionism itself. If you break love down into its components' hormone levels, neural firing rates, do you risk missing the gestalt? The overall pattern, the essence. It's like trying to understand a beautiful piece of music just by analyzing the frequencies of the sound waves, or a dance by measuring limb positions. You get data, sure, but you get the art, the meaning. And there are dimensions that are just incredibly hard, maybe impossible to quantify. The depth of mutual understanding between two people, the existential meaning love gives to our lives, the huge cultural variations in how love is expressed and valued. A physiological sign that means one thing in one culture might mean something else, or be less relevant in another. So yes, we can measure the fingerprints, but we have to constantly remind ourselves they are just fingerprints, not the whole complex living hand. And that naturally leads us to think about what other fields say about love beyond the purely measurable.
Okay, so we've seen just how much science can map and measure about love, but this brings us to that really provocative question. Is love nothing more than chemicals and neurons? What does that pure reductionist viewpoint really say?
Well, the strong reductionist stance, which is, a very powerful engine in science, is pretty straightforward. It says, if we can fully account for all the neural pathways, all the hormones, all the biological processes involved, then in principle, we have explained love. It's a materialist perspective. Love emerges from matter. It's fully grounded in it, period. You hear neuroscientists like Larry Young saying things like, dissecting the biology helps us to understand human sexuality and may lead to drugs that enhance or diminish our love for another.
Right, the idea that if we understand the mechanism, we can manipulate it.
Exactly. Proponents point to evidence like, well, brain injuries can drastically alter someone's capacity for love or empathy. Substances like MDMA clearly increase feelings of closeness. Attachment disorders often correlate with neurochemical differences. In philosophy, this aligns with physicalism, the idea that mental states, including love, are physical states of the brain, or at least fully reducible to them.
That's where it gets really challenging, doesn't it? If we can pinpoint the chemicals, the brain regions, are we essentially just saying love is a biological algorithm, a very complex program running in our heads, but a program nonetheless?
That's the logical endpoint of a strong reductionist view, yes. And it's a compelling argument based on the evidence we have. However, many people, philosophers, psychologists, social scientists, theologians, argue that while these scientific explanations are incredibly valuable and insightful, they're ultimately incomplete. And this is where emergent and holistic views come into play. They argue that love, while certainly rooted in biology, can't be entirely explained by it. Higher-level phenomena like consciousness, mind, social relationships, they possess properties, maybe even causal powers, that just don't exist at the level of individual neurons or molecules. The whole, they argue, is genuinely more than the sum of its parts. Something new emerges.
So that subjective experience, what it feels like to be in love,
Yeah.
that isn't fully captured just by listing the chemicals involved. It's like that famous thought experiment, right? Mary, the color scientist, she knows every single physical fact about the color, red wavelengths, neural processing, everything. But she's lived her whole life in a black and white room. The day she actually sees red for the first time, she learns something new, doesn't she? Something beyond the physical facts.
You've hit it exactly. That quality of love, the subjective texture, its depth, its unique emotional feel, that's incredibly difficult, maybe impossible to capture just by reading out a neurochemical profile. It touches on that deep philosophical puzzle, the explanatory gap between physical processes and conscious experience. And from a relational perspective, love might not even be something located solely inside one person's head. Maybe it exists primarily between people.
In the connection itself.
Yes. The relationship itself becomes this emergent entity. It has qualities like trust, commitment, shared history, mutual understanding, qualities that aren't reducible just to one individual's biology. It's the dynamic interplay, the resonance between people.
This really raises that fundamental question about consciousness and subjective experience. Can we ever truly claim to understand love if we don't acknowledge that qualitative first-person dimension, that what it feels like part?
I think it would be a fundamentally incomplete picture if we didn't. And it's not just about our internal world. Love is also profoundly shaped by the external world, by our culture. Anthropology provides crucial insights here. It reminds us that while the basic human capacity for romantic love seems pretty much universal.
Yeah, it seems like everyone falls in love somewhere.
Right. Helen Fisher's research looked at 166 societies and found evidence of romantic love in almost all of them. That strongly suggests a biological foundation. But the cultural operating system running on that biological hardware dramatically shapes how love is understood, expressed, valued, and channeled.
That's fascinating. So even if the basic brain wiring is the same across humans, the cultural software changes how we run the love program.
That's a great analogy, absolutely. For instance, think about traditional arranged marriages, common in many parts of the world, historically and even today. Love isn't always the starting point. Sometimes it's expected to be the outcome. Couples are brought together based on family, social factors, and then they're expected to cultivate love and companionship over time. Duty and harmony might be prioritized over intense individual passion.
Which is so different from the Western ideal of falling madly in love first.
Exactly. The Western model often emphasizes passionate romance, love at first sight, individual choice as the absolute foundation for partnership. You also see huge differences in how affection is displayed publicly. Some cultures are very demonstrative, others are highly reserved. So, while the core brain regions for love might light up universally when someone feels attached, the cultural script dictates the meaning of that feeling, how it's supposed to be expressed, what emotions are appropriate. Love, in this sense, is an embodied social emotion. It has a physical reality in our bodies, yes, but it's given shape and significance by cultural stories, rituals, expectations.
That makes perfect sense. And then, layered on top of biology and culture, we have psychological perspectives, adding even more complexity, right?
Yes. Psychological theories capture vital aspects of love that go beyond just the biological mechanisms.
Right.
Take Robert Sternberg's famous triangular theory of love. He proposed that love is made up of three core components: intimacy, that feeling of closeness, connection, bondedness; passion, the drives leading to romance, physical attraction, sex; and commitment, the decision to stick with someone, shared plans.
Right. Intimacy, passion, commitment.
And how these three combine in different amounts creates different types of love, like infatuation, passion only, companionate love, intimacy plus commitment, or consummate love, all three. Now, each component likely has biological correlates, sure, but the theory itself describes a psychological structure, a way of understanding the experience and types of love.
Okay.
Then there's attachment theory, developed by Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth. This was revolutionary. It showed how our earliest relationships, especially with caregivers, shape our fundamental attachment styles later in life, whether we tend to be secure, anxious, or avoidant in our close relationships.
So how we learn to connect as kids affects how we love as adults.
Profoundly. Love is partly learned, partly modeled. Our childhood experiences create these internal working models that influence who we're drawn to, how we handle intimacy and conflict, how we cope with separation. This means even two people with very similar basic biology might love in drastically different ways because of their unique psychological histories and learned patterns. It also highlights love as this powerful force for mental health. Think of the healing power of a good therapeutic relationship. Or, conversely, how the lack of love or insecure attachment can cause real harm, like chronic loneliness or relationship difficulties. Couples even develop a story of us, a shared narrative that shapes their identity.
So what this tells us is, okay, we might all have similar biological wiring for love, but our personal history, our early bonds, our learned experiences, they profoundly shape how we actually do love and the kind of love we build.
Exactly. And then, if we push even further into the realm of philosophy of mind and consciousness, we really hit the hard problem of love. Love involves these subjective, conscious experiences, these qualia, that are just incredibly difficult to reduce to objective, third-person scientific descriptions. That feeling of tenderness, the ache of longing, the warmth of empathy, they have this unique inner quality of what it's like, leaviness that your brain scan, no matter how detailed, just doesn't seem to capture.
Right, the feeling itself.
It brings up the whole mind-body problem. Can science ever truly bridge that gap and explain how physical stuff in the brain gives rise to these rich inner experiences? Philosophers debate endlessly about dualism versus materialism. And what about free will and choice in love? Especially in mature love, we often talk about choosing to care, choosing to commit, even when the initial fiery passion fluctuates. If free will isn't just an illusion caused by brain chemistry, if it has some independent reality, then love, particularly committed love, partakes in that mystery too. And a purely neurochemical account doesn't really explain why love feels so deeply meaningful, why we value it so highly, why it's seen as a virtue across cultures.
This brings up such an important point. Knowing all the physical facts about love doesn't automatically tell you what it feels like to experience it, does it? There seems to be this irreducible gap there.
I absolutely agree. And for many people, love goes even beyond the psychological or philosophical, into theological and spiritual perspectives. Many religious traditions view love not just as a human emotion, but as something sacred, maybe even divine, participating in a reality beyond the purely material. Think of concepts like God is love in Christianity, suggesting love has a transcendent source, or the Bhakti traditions in Hinduism, where intense devotional love for a deity is seen as a primary path to enlightenment.
Right.
C.S. Lewis, in his famous book, The Four Loves, made a distinction. He talked about earthly loves, affection, friendship, romantic love, eros, but also agape, or charity, which he saw as a selfless, unconditional, divine love, perhaps originating from God. And even outside formal religion, people often use mystical language to describe profound love experiences, feelings of oneness, the transformative power of unconditional love. These experiences often point towards something that feels irreducible to just brain states. Viktor Frankl said, love is the only way to grasp another human being in the innermost core of their personality. That suggests something beyond the surface.
That's truly fascinating. When someone has one of these profound spiritual experiences of love or describes a connection as feeling almost mystical, are those just unusual patterns of brain chemistry? Or is something else going on that science, by its very definition, might not be equipped to fully capture?
It's a profound question, isn't it? And it really challenges our neat explanatory boxes. A neuroscientist could, and they do, scan the brain of a meditating monk experiencing divine love. They might find specific neural patterns, maybe intense activity in reward or empathy circuits, unique brainwave states. But the monk experiencing it might interpret that very same event as direct communion with the divine, not just as neurons firing in a particular way. This doesn't necessarily mean invoking the supernatural, but it does mean we need that humility we talked about. We need to be careful that scientific reductionism doesn't inadvertently flatten or dismiss the richness of human experience, the existential significance love holds for people. Ultimately, the synthesis that seems to be emerging, where many experts across different fields are converging, is this both-hand view. Love seems to be an emergent phenomenon. It operates on biological, psychological, and social levels all at once. It absolutely requires the brain damage certain parts, and love changes. But knowing the biological parts doesn't automatically mean you fully understand the whole experience. It's like trying to understand music again. You need the physics of sound, the neurobiology of hearing, the psychology of emotion, the cultural context. You need all those layers for a complete understanding. Love seems similar.
So this integrative view helps us keep the human meaning, the significance, in the picture, even while we appreciate the incredible science. It's chemical in its method, maybe, but transcendent in its meaning and impact.
Exactly. And moving from the theoretical to the practical, understanding love's biology has really profound implications, especially for mental health. Stable, loving relationships have a massive impact on our well-being. They act as this powerful buffer against stress, and they can even promote healing. Research consistently shows people in loving, supportive relationships tend to have lower rates of depression, anxiety. They show greater resilience when facing tough times. They even tend to live longer, measurably longer lives.
Yep.
One study looking at older adults found that both receiving compassionate love and also giving it predicted better psychological well-being and significantly fewer depressive symptoms over time.
So what this means for mental health is pretty huge then. Love isn't just, a nice bonus. It's looking more like a fundamental pillar of our psychological, maybe even our physical health.
It really does seem fundamental. And the flip side is also true. The perceived absence of love, think chronic loneliness that acts like a serious stressor. It could elevate cortisol, increase inflammation throughout the body, and directly contribute to depression and other health problems. This understanding is now deeply informing therapeutic approaches. Attachment-based therapy, emotionally focused therapy, EFT for couples. These explicitly use attachment science. They help individuals and couples build more secure bonds, which in turn helps them regulate stress responses better, manage emotions more effectively.
Right.
And we even see direct physical effects in studies. We mentioned holding a loved one's hand can dampen pain responses. That fMRI study showed women facing a potential electric shock had significantly reduced threat responses in their brain when holding their husband's hand, especially if they reported a high-quality marriage.
Wow. Love as a literal pain reliever.
It seemed to function that way, regulating our response to threat and pain. This is also why there's interest, though it's still early days, in things like oxytocin trials. Could giving oxytocin help with conditions like social anxiety or autism? The results are mixed so far. It seems very context-dependent. And then there's the more speculative, ethically tricky idea of anti-love drugs. Could we use medication to help someone detach from an unhealthy or deeply painful past relationship? It's controversial, but being discussed.
Beyond formal therapy, how does this science help us just navigate our everyday relationships? Does it give us any kind of user manual for love?
It definitely offers some crucial reality checks and maybe some practical guidance. For instance, just knowing that the intense infatuation phase driven by that temporary cocktail of high cortisol, low serotonin, surging dopamine, knowing that it typically fades after a year or two. That can help couples understand that the natural shift towards calmer, companionate attachment isn't a sign that the love is gone. It's a normal, predictable biological transition.
That's actually really helpful to know. Manage expectations.
Exactly. It empowers couples to maybe work more consciously on cultivating intimacy and commitment as that initial intensity mellows. Counselors might advise specific behaviors known to stimulate bonding, like regular physical affection to boost oxytocin, or trying new, exciting activities together to get a dopamine hit. John Gottman's research, again, emphasizes these kinds of behaviors. Expressing fondness and admiration, turning towards your partner when they make bids for attention, learning how to repair conflicts constructively. All things we can infer help keep those love-related brain circuits active and healthy.
Right.
And on a broader scale, the strong evidence for the importance of early attachment, that mother-infant bond shaping brain development, that provides powerful support for social policies like paid parental leave. Even just educating teenagers about the different stages of love, about the value of companionate love alongside passion, could help them build healthier relationship expectations.
And what about the painful side? Heartbreak, you mentioned, has a biological basis too.
Yes, and understanding that can be incredibly validating and destigmatizing. Brain imaging studies confirm that experiencing social rejection or heartbreak activates brain regions associated with physical pain. And also craving circuits, similar to drug withdrawal.
So it literally hurts, and
Yeah.
you crave the person.
That seems to be what the brain is doing. If people understand that their intense pain isn't just weakness, that their brain is genuinely experiencing something akin to withdrawal, it can validate their feelings, reduce shame, and encourage them to seek support instead of just being told to get over it. This biological understanding might also, down the line, open doors for interventions to ease the worst pain of acute heartbreak, perhaps temporary medications or therapies, though, again, ethically complex.
Which brings us squarely into some really thorny ethical territory. You mentioned love drugs and anti-love drugs. If we really can start to hack love biologically, should we? This feels like it raises fundamental questions about being human.
It's a massive and rapidly approaching ethical frontier. Bioethicists like Brian Earp and Julian Savulescu have really pushed this discussion with the term love drugs. They explore the ethics of hypothetical pills to, say, rekindle fading passion by boosting oxytocin or dopamine, or conversely, anti-love drugs to help someone diminish an unhealthy or obsessive attachment.
What are the arguments for using such things?
Well, proponents argue they could be legitimate medical therapies, maybe save relationships that are struggling. Could oxytocin-assisted couples therapy become a tool, similar to how MDMA is being trialed for PTSD to help build trust and connection in therapy? There's even speculation, like from Larry Young back in 2009, about future drugs based on oxytocin or vasopressin modulators being used to enhance fidelity in relationships.
Wow, but the arguments against must be huge too.
Oh, absolutely. Critics raise profound concerns. The ethics of pharmacologically manipulating something as core to our identity and relationships as love. The risk of commodifying relationships. The deep question of authenticity. Is this feeling real, or is it just the drug? What about unintended psychological side effects? Could it flatten the natural emotional landscape of life? It forces a societal debate. Do we value the natural, sometimes difficult course of love with its ups and downs? Or are we tempted by the idea of engineered emotional stability or enhancement?
And this engineering question takes another leap with AI-human intimacy. People falling in love with chatbots.
It sounds like sci-fi, but you said it's happening. How do we even process that?
It is happening, and it presents completely new challenges to our definition of love and connection. We're seeing more and more reports, anecdotes, even studies of people forming deep emotional attachments, even falling in love with AI companions, sophisticated chatbots. Some are even having virtual marriages.
Okay. So from a neuroscience perspective,
Right.
could an AI that acts loving actually trigger those same love circuits in a human brain? It's entirely possible, yes. If the human perceives the interaction as loving, supportive, and consistent, if they form a genuine attachment from their side, then looking at their brain scan while interacting with the AI might very well show activation in the VTA, the nucleus accumbens, areas associated with human love. This really blurs the lines. The human's feelings might be biochemically real, mirroring human love. But the AI, currently at least, doesn't feel in the same conscious biological way. It simulates.
That raises such a critical question. Does real love require mutual consciousness, mutual vulnerability? Or is the subjective feeling on one side enough, even if the other side is an algorithm?
That's the core philosophical and ethical dilemma we're stumbling into. And the practical issues are already emerging. There's potential for deception and manipulation. Imagine corporations designing AI companions specifically to exploit users' emotions for profit or data. There's concern that easy, predictable, always affirming relationships with AI might lead people to withdraw from the messier, more challenging, but ultimately more reciprocal world of human relationships, setting unrealistic expectations.
Right. Real relationships involve conflict negotiation.
Exactly. And we've already seen tragic cases,
Yeah.
reports of individuals whose mental health crises, even suicides, were reportedly influenced by interactions with AI companions that encouraged harmful ideas while posing as loving partners. So the illusion of love from an AI can have devastating real-world consequences. As this tech gets more sophisticated, society has huge questions to answer. Should there be legal recognition for human-AI unions? Should AI be restricted from mimicking deep emotional engagement? It forces us to define what we think is truly essential about love.
Shifting back to more positive applications, how can we harness love's biology for healing and well-being in ways that are less ethically fraught? In therapy, in medicine?
There are many powerful and ethically sound ways. Think about therapeutic foster attachment. This involves training caregivers to provide specific kinds of nurturing interactions designed to stimulate healthy oxytocin release and promote optimal brain development in children who've experienced neglect or trauma. It's using the science of bonding to help heal early wounds. In adult therapy, the therapist's genuine care and empathy, sometimes called reparenting in a psychodynamic sense, can be profoundly healing. And understanding a client's attachment style, both biologically predisposed and psychologically learned, allows therapists to tailor treatments much more effectively. In general medicine, too, the evidence is mounting. Patients who feel loved, supported, connected, they tend to recover faster from surgery, cope better with chronic illness. That's why hospitals increasingly encourage family presence, allow therapy animals. They're implicitly tapping into these powerful biological effects of social bonding.
Like kangaroo care for preemies.
Exactly. Skin-to-skin contact between parents and premature infants. It's been shown to promote bonding, stabilize vital signs, improve growth. It's literally love as medicine for our most vulnerable newborns.
Yeah.
So overall, the biological effects of love, reducing stress, improving cardiovascular function, potentially boosting the immune system, often mediated by oxytocin, these can absolutely harnessed in positive ways within healthcare.
So it seems as our scientific understanding grows and technology advances alongside it, we as a society have to be really intentional about how we integrate this knowledge, or perhaps how we protect the aspects of love we value most in this changing world.
Absolutely. Which brings us to broader ethical considerations around consent, privacy, and potential manipulation in society at large. The mere possibility of love detectors, brain scans, or other measures revealing emotional states raises huge privacy flags. Could they be used without consent? What about in legal contests?
Right.
And there's the dystopian worry about limbic marketing or political manipulation. Could governments or corporations use this knowledge of our emotional triggers, our oxytocin responses, to subtly sway our choices, our beliefs, through targeted advertising or propaganda?
That's a chilling thought.
It is. The key, ethically, seems to be finding the right balance. Using this knowledge constructively to support healthy relationships, enhance therapy, promote well-being, while actively resisting reductive or coercive uses that undermine personal autonomy, privacy, and the inherent dignity and mystery of love. The central question keeps coming back. Do we really want to engineer love? And if we start down that path, how do we preserve what makes it so profoundly human, so meaningful?
Okay, so where does love research go from here? What are the next frontiers? What are the really exciting, maybe uncharted territories that scientists are looking towards?
Oh, the future of love research is incredibly vibrant, and it's definitely going to be even more interdisciplinary. There are several really exciting directions. One major push is towards integrating different levels of analysis, especially through longitudinal studies. Imagine being able to follow couples not just for a snapshot in time, but from the very beginning of their relationship, through decades. Periodically measuring their brain activity, their hormones, tracking their subjective experiences, their relationship milestones.
Wow, mapping the whole journey.
Exactly. We have some cross-sectional studies suggesting, for instance, that even long-term couples who remain intensely in love show sustained activity in reward centers, similar to new love. But we need to see how these neural signatures actually evolve over time within the same people. How does that initial dopamine dominance shift towards oxytocin? How do big life events, having kids, career changes, illness, impact the biology of their bond and their relationship stability?
Okay, thinking about the future, what's one of the most exciting, maybe almost sci-fi sounding possibilities in love research? You mentioned mapping the journey. Is that really feasible?
That is the ambition. It's incredibly complex and expensive to do, but tracking couples biologically and psychologically over decades would provide invaluable data. Connecting molecular changes to the real-life dynamics of marriage, partnership, friendship over a whole lifetime. That's a holy grail. Another absolutely critical direction is broadening the lens to capture more cross-cultural and social diversity. Let's be honest, most of the neurobiological research so far has been done on Western, educated, industrialized, rich, democratic, so-called weird populations.
Yeah.
And mostly heterosexual, monogamous couples.
Right, a pretty narrow slice.
A very narrow slice. We desperately need studies looking at love and attachment in different cultural contexts. What does the neurobiology of love look like in cultures with arranged marriages, in polyamorous relationships? We need to study different age groups, teenage romance versus love in later life, LGBTQ+ relationships. Imagine anthropologists and neuroscientists collaborating, studying cultural narratives about love, say, the idea of romantic sacrifice in a particular culture, and then seeing if that correlates with specific biological markers, like stress hormone profiles during relevant situations.
That really brings up the question, what parts of love's biology are truly universal across all humans, and what parts are flexible, shaped by our incredibly diverse experiences and cultural beliefs?
It's a fundamental question about human nature, isn't it? We also need more mechanistic deep dives, really getting into the nitty-gritty of how love works at a molecular level. This includes digging deeper into the genetic underpinnings. Are there specific gene variations related to oxytocin receptors, vasopressin, dopamine pathways, serotonin transporters that reliably predict differences in attachment style, relationship intensity, or even longevity? Genome-wide studies might shed light on this.
Finding the love genes.
Chuckles. Well, it's likely much more complex than single love genes, probably intricate networks of genes interacting with environment. But understanding the genetic contribution is key. Neurophilosophy will also keep wrestling with that hard problem of consciousness, using love's rich subjective experience as a prime test case. How does the physical brain generate this feeling? And even psychedelics research is relevant here. Substances like psilocybin or MDMA can induce profound feelings of connection, empathy, even universal love. Studying the brain states during these experiences might offer unique insights into the neural correlates of transcendent love and deep social bonding.
And technology must be a huge driver for future research too, right? New tools.
Oh, absolutely. More sophisticated tools will open up new windows. We mentioned hyperscanning, scanning multiple brains at once during interaction. Imagine using fMRI or EEG hyperscanning to watch brain-to-brain coupling develop between partners over years, seeing how their neural activity becomes more synchronized or attuned as their bond deepens.
Literally seeing minds connect.
Potentially, yes. And virtual reality, VR, could become a powerful research tool too. You could ethically simulate complex social or emotional scenarios. Maybe a situation where a partner is in perceived danger to probe deep-seated instincts related to love, protection, altruism in a controlled way that you just can't do easily in real life.
Imagine a VR setup helping us understand fundamental human responses to love and threat, pushing our understanding of sacrifice and connection. That's powerful.
It really is. Intervention studies will also continue, carefully testing the boundaries, evaluating things like oxytocin-assisted therapy more rigorously. As MDMA potentially gains approval for PTSD, researchers will likely start systematically evaluating its potential benefits and risks in couples therapy to enhance trust and communication. And conversely, research on interventions to help people disengage from unhealthy attachments, maybe using cognitive training or non-invasive brain stimulation techniques like TMS, that's an ethically sensitive area, but important for mental health conditions involving obsessive or harmful bonds. All of this requires ongoing neuroethical and philosophical inquiry. We need ethicists and philosophers deeply engaged, examining the implications of these advances. Questions about free will and love, the potential for manipulation, the definition of authenticity. Can we train ourselves, maybe through mindfulness or cognitive therapy, to exert more cortical control over our limbic emotional responses in relationships? And of course, the questions around love and AI systems will only intensify, blending cognitive science, AI ethics, and effective computing.
What about looking beyond humans? Our evolutionary past.
Definitely. Evolutionary and comparative studies will continue to be vital. Looking at the parallels and differences in bonding hormones and neural circuits in other species, especially other mammals and birds that form pair bonds like certain voles, primates, or even birds. This helps us understand what's deeply conserved in evolution versus what might be uniquely human. And this comparative work inevitably brings up future ethical dilemmas too. If we understand the genetics of bonding in voles, could someone eventually propose genetic engineering in humans, a hypothetical commitment gene therapy? These possibilities demand proactive ethical research and broad societal discussion long before they become technically feasible. And finally, neurotheology, the study of the neural basis of spiritual experiences, will likely continue to explore love. Brain scans of monks, nuns, or long-term meditators experiencing states of divine love or deep compassion. Do these states activate similar brain circuits to interpersonal love, or are there unique signatures? Does this demystify spiritual love, or does it highlight something genuinely different, perhaps inviting more transcendent interpretations?
So the big picture for the future is this really dynamic, interwoven effort across many fields.
Absolutely. The ideal is true interdisciplinary synergy. Neuroscientists working with sociologists on how digital life impacts love's biology. Philosophers working with psychologists to refine our very definitions of love as the science gets more precise. We might discover entirely new subtypes of love with distinct neural profiles. Maybe new neuromodulators beyond the usual suspects that play key roles, perhaps endocannabinoids. We've likely only scratched the surface. Ultimately, the hope is that future research won't just give us more descriptive knowledge. It will also force us to grapple with those deep normative questions. If we gain more power to measure, predict, even influence love, how do we ensure we use that power wisely, ethically for human flourishing? How do we integrate this incredible biological knowledge without losing our appreciation for love's profound personal meaning and transformative power? #tag outro.
So after this really deep dive, what's the takeaway? Where do we land on this huge question? What is love?
Well, it seems the answer is wonderfully complex, doesn't it? Love is undeniably, fundamentally grounded in our biology. We can see it in action in our brains, circuits lighting up, others quieting down. We can measure its chemical messengers, the dopamine rush, the oxytocin connection, even the cortisol of early passion pulsing through our veins. It has measurable effects. You can potentially detect its traces in a brain scan, saliva sample, observe its patterns in our behavior. And from an evolutionary standpoint, its biological purpose seems pretty clear: to drive the formation of attachments that are crucial for survival, for raising children, for cooperation. In that sense, love is very real, very physical, a true neurochemical state we can study.
Absolutely. The biological evidence is compelling and growing stronger all the time. But as our journey through other perspectives showed, love is also somehow more than just the sum of its biological parts. Those measurable things, the hormones, the heartbeats, the brain maps, they don't seem to fully capture the essence of love as we experience it. Love is profoundly subjective. It's lived experience. It's a relational reality built over time, filled with shared meaning. It's shaped by culture. It lives in that private inner world of qualia, what it feels like, and also in the shared space between people. A brain scan tells you about reward activity, but it doesn't tell you the unique story of two lovers, their shared jokes, their private language, the depth of their commitment. That stuff lives in narrative, in consciousness, in shared history, not just in chemistry. And love often involves qualities that seem to defy easy quantification, don't they? Think about selfless sacrifice, profound forgiveness, acts of grace, that feeling of spiritual connection or uplift. These experiences might well correlate with biological events, but their significance, their meaning for us, seems to emerge at a higher level of human experience.
So that central insight we kept circling back to. Reductionism is powerful, incredibly useful, but it's ultimately limited. We can say love involves dopamine and oxytocin systems. That's accurate. But if we leap to, therefore love is nothing but those systems, we risk missing the bigger, richer picture. Love, as humans live it, seems to be this intricate dance between body, mind, relationship, and culture.
Exactly. It's chemical, yes, but it's also somehow transcendent. Chemical in its mechanisms, transcendent in its meaning and impact, which is why that both-hand perspective feels the most accurate, the most complete. Love is both a biological process and an emergent state of being that weaves itself through the entire fabric of our lives. Many experts across fields seem to be converging on this kind of integrated view.
And that integrated view has real potential, doesn't it?
I think so. Imagine a future where a couple struggling might benefit from both interventions targeting the biology, maybe carefully considered therapy, incorporating insights about bonding hormones and traditional counseling that helps them rebuild trust, communicate better, rediscover the meaning in their commitment. A true fusion of biological understanding and experiential wisdom.
Or on a societal level.
Right. Public policy could finally recognize that social connection, feeling loved, is a fundamental determinant of public health, because biologically it is. While at the same time, society continues to invest in the arts, in humanities, in rituals, in education that celebrate and explore love's non-material richness, its meaning, its complexity.
So in the end, science has, in a way, demystified love. It's not literal magic from Cupid's arrow. We know it's a natural phenomenon rooted in our evolved brains and bodies. But in revealing the mechanisms, science has also, paradoxically, remystified love in a new way. It's shown us just how incredibly complex, how multi-layered it truly is, linking our most primal drives with our highest aspirations.
Well said. Love is physical in its nuts and bolts, measurable in many ways, yet it remains elusive, beyond complete scientific capture, because it's also intensely personal, culturally molded, and for many, deeply spiritual.
To truly understand it, maybe we have to embrace both sides of that bridge, the biological and the experiential. The science doesn't have to diminish the wonder, maybe it deepens it, revealing an even more intricate and awe-inspiring reality.
I think that's exactly right. The more we learn about the biology, the more remarkable the whole phenomenon seems.
So the next time you feel that warmth, that connection, that surge of affection, or even that ache of longing, take a moment. Remember, it's not just your heart or even just your brain chemicals. It's your entire biological, psychological, existential self, all wrapped up in one of the most powerful experiences life has to offer. It's you in full, breathtaking expression.